Guarding the Guard Dogs is the title of this. Ezekiel Kralin wrote. Email correspondence, June 4th, last year. Subject, Deke update, continued. Date, June 4th. During our conversation that morning of June the 2nd, he brought up my criticism of his explosive anger at the dogs now and then. I love them with all my heart, but sometimes they do stupid things. No, they don't do stupid things, I bristled. They're not stupid. They're darling pups who always do the best they can to please you. You're just making excuses for your own stupid behavior. That's not loving them with all your heart. In fact, it's disgraceful. He did not oppose me, but just let it sink in. Or more likely, my words went in one ear and out the other. I wished to glob he'd stop his abusive behavior when it comes to Lucky and Flacco. I'd wrest them from the addle-pate ASAP if I could get away with it, which will probably happen soon enough now that my star has begun to ascend and my authority gains strength as a result. Even should he cease this very moment, at this point I cannot forgive him his crimes against the dogs, for he has crudely persisted regardless of my frequent admonitions over many months, well over 3 years, in fact. Does he really think, because I do not scream and cuss at him but use a patient approach for the sake of not traumatizing the hounds, that his offenses are not so serious? If so, he's in for a grievously rude awakening. Other than that, it was a righteous meet-up, and I wished them a safe and meritorious day's journey. However, he returned by nightfall and wound up crashed out there all night long, as if my warning against attracting freaks to his side never occurred. Fortunately, that did not happen this time around, but I figured Chai Man would look out his window and be pissed over Deke's prolonged presence, surrounded by a pool of debris that blocked a large swath of the sidewalk, while I provided the mutts with a sleeping bag, food and water, and my kind affections. As a matter of fact, early in the night when I stepped out to check up on them, who should show up but C.M. with his 2 chihuahuas. He didn't say a word, but walked past me and opened the gate. Geez, don't I ever get a break. I was only out there for 2 minutes. It was unusually quiet that night, so the few times the pups barked, it felt especially loud. Natch, it had to happen just a few days after C.M. complained about that, as if the cosmos hates me, and a fire truck wailed by about 1:30 a.m., which siren really set the dogs off in raucous cacophony. Each time they barked, I stepped out to cover them back up, seeing as they also moved around at such moments before settling back down again. And, of course, Deke never bothers to keep them protected from the cold night air. He's either dead to the world, but even when awake, he simply ignores them. So, of course, I didn't get much sleep that night in my duty to guard the guard dogs. By the way, keeping their heads covered, along with their bodies, allows them to rest better, because they're unlikely to bark at what they don't see walking by. I want to point out that barking that night was more frequent than usual, and the ghost town stillness, by contrast, didn't help any either. It was a Friday night, for fuck's sake, so why so dead? Memorial Day weekend, I suppose. Flacco and Lucky always raise their noggins when they hear me exit the gate. I guess they smell me, too, because they don't do that whenever anyone else exits or enters. I heard them bark a bit around 4 a.m., so I stepped out to cover them up again. There was Flacco, lying beside her master, instead of under an old coat I placed on her earlier, for, unlike her brother, who was still bundled in comfort, she had lain atop Deke's chest. He must have rolled onto his side and pulled the coat over him with no regard for Flacco, but there was ample sleeping bag freed up to keep her comfy and warm, too. So just when I started to settle her in, she rolled over on her back, ready for those belly scritches she loves so much. Her eyes were half closed in partial slumber as I tended to her tummy rubs while her sweet little face glowed in smiley bliss. When I bent farther down to kiss her on the schnoz, her tongue gave my face a few gentle licks of gratitude. I wanted to stay there with her for the rest of the night, but of course that wasn't possible. So I returned to hovel after a minute or two. Besides, she had already rolled back on her side to curl up within a plush fold of the sleeping bag, and I knew she'd be fine without me. Before departing, I made sure to give Lucky a few pats and a kiss as well, and replaced a corner of the bag over his head so he'd have a better sleep. The problem with Deke camping out there at night is getting my sleeping bag back. He knows my bedtime is midnight sharp, but I never know if he decides to zonk out for longer and whether or not he'll bother to call up to me should he leave later on. And I wouldn't dream of denying the pooches their comfort just because I needed to crash out myself. Most of the time, he departs before 12 and announces his adieu, so I can collect the sleeping bag and sometimes a spare coat as well. Even when he lingers till around 1 or 2 a.m., he still call up to me. He'll still call up to me, which I appreciate, even though it disturbs my rest, but that night he didn't. Fortunately, around 6 a.m., just when dawn arrived casting soft shadows, I heard him make a loud hacking sound to clear his throat, no doubt, a sign of his imminent departure, perhaps. So I rose up to peer out the window. Yep, he was up and about, ready to go. I rushed downstairs in my slide slippers, no hat or coat, to discover they were already far up the block toward Castro Street. He left behind a large, deep wagon made of tough red canvas, fastened to a metal frame and with a long black handle. Very nice, I thought. So why is he leaving it behind? It even folds up, I noticed while extracting the sleeping bag and coat, the only items contained therein. I also cleaned up some debris he left behind and then rolled the wagon between bus stop stall and trash bin, figuring another vagrant will claim it before long. It's just too enticing to ignore. After returning hovel with my own possessions, it occurred to me I should stash it myself. Such a handy form of portable storage or puppy carriage that Deke could no doubt use somewhere down the line, but right when I returned back outside and before the gate even closed, some fellow had already snatched it up and was crossing Noe Street with the wagon in tow. Damn it! Okay, I thought, enough of that. Time for Zeke to return hovel and crash out for an hour of worry-free shut-eye. At last. To be continued.